this subject, mindset of auditing, I'll be refreshing because there were some last minute pushes. It's a subject that's quite dear to me. I really love it because yeah, it's quite hard to know when you're intermediate or advanced. But let's say that in this industry of auditing, it's very, very easy to plateau, to kind of stop progressing, even if you're like reading a lot of reports and such. You just don't feel like you're finding the business logic issues or that you're. Are you recording maybe?
Yes, I'm recording.
Uh, there weren't any alerts. All right. So I'll just continue. So yeah, it's quite dear to me because this is mainly what made me kind of get some breakthrough and stop the plateauing. Because yeah, um, what best method than comparing what you're doing with what others that are very renowned in the industry are doing? And this is what it's about. You will see a lot of names of several famous auditors and such that have such and such mindset. So I'll start. Who am I? As we said a little earlier of recording, I'm a full-time security researcher at Certora. Um, I'm also, but not really active anymore, currently a security researcher at Spearbit, and also a judge and scout on Code Arena. I tagged along Epoch Zero of Securium back in 2021. That started Code Arena 2021. Actually, just realized, yeah, like yesterday, that I was the first backstage user of Code Arena, uh, or something like that. And yeah, I also was in Y Academy's fourth cohort, fourth block.
Amazing.
So disclaimers, views are my own, and the information presented is from my own research. So I might get some things wrong, which I don't really believe, because usually, uh, well, I don't write things down by inventing some information, but we never know. Uh, and before starting, first, a word from our sponsor, NordVPN, and I will stop the joke here.
Classic.
No VPN everywhere. So generality is applicable to all mindsets. This is how I called the first part. This is some things that all auditors are kind of doing, be it consciously or unconsciously. You will see a lot of terms that you probably know about or heard about. Let's start. So, line by line, lots of thoughts about this one. It's not enough by itself. But this is something that's part of everyone's process. So line by line, assumed users, Tincho, and everyone, let's say. It's just that Tincho on some video really insisted on that because there are some audits he was on where some bugs would have been missed if you didn't look intently enough at each line. So there's that. Everyone knows about line by line. You read every line. You ask yourself some questions. Nothing much to say. But little news. You should focus when you're going line by line on what the contract's supposed to do and compare it to what it's doing. Because the real issue is like when you're reading specs and such. When you've got some specifications or the code in front of you and you're reading it just by um, being kind of brainless, just absorbing what you're seeing, you may be tempted to just accept what is in front of you and assume that it's doing what it's supposed to do. But no, try to really understand the intent of an instruction and see if it really matches the instruction. And quite often, this isn't quite often, sometimes, let's say, this isn't the case exactly. So a little something might be missing, little something might be here that shouldn't be there, like a +1, uh, things like that. So focus on the intent, the intention, and the business logic. So when you're going line by line, there's that. Little tips. You can do that multiple times. It's not like you need to understand everything at once when you're going through the code. Like, oh, I went through this contract, 200 lines of codes per hour. So this one, I went line by line. I didn't find anything. So I'm just too dumb to find bugs and such. No, uh, there's no rule preventing you from reading multiple times the code or just staring at it. The line by line, it's like the first step. Well, not exactly. I will go into depth a little later, but this is what gets you in familiarity with the code and the intent of what's supposed to happen. So yes, so that you can get into different mental modes that I will talk about. After talking about the state machine, because Uh, this is something that a lot of auditors aren't conscious about, and it was mentioned recently by GM Hacker and Zach Brandt. It's the fact, as I said, most people do that unconsciously. It's the actual invisible puzzle. What you should um, think about when there's a contract and you're making some transaction, function calls, anything, it's actually how it's going from one state to another, and also can a state that could wreck the protocol be reached. I will go into more depth later about that, including what Zach Brandt says and does. But yeah, this is the invisible puzzle that most people are not aware of. I could have cited, quoted Bytes 32 here because recently he posted, he goes pen and paper on that. He posted the fact that he draws the state machine, what happens between function and such, how things are related to one another. And yeah, this is the invisible puzzle, and you need to be aware of the fact that you have your contract, you have your state, you do something, have another state. And your goal to wreck the protocol is to reach a bad state that would enable you to, I don't know, join funds, kill everyone, flood the planet, something like that. And about the state machine, there's Gerard Persoon and Tin Shaw that are the known drawers in this industry, also Bytes 32, who goes pen and paper. And what they do, kinda, I'll be mainly talking about Gerard Persoon because we kind of talked about this. You can also browse his conversation, his mentoring channel on Securium's Discord because he does answer quite a bit of questions when you ask him how he does things. So he actually don't really look for bugs in the first few days, and he tries to understand the contract fully, let the information sink in, and sleep over it. And then the magic of what he does is that he makes some diagrams, he moves the parts around with, yes, PowerPoint, and he lets his mind wander. Gerard is a lead security researcher at Peerbit and was also teaching Ethereum before. I don't know his full history, but he is quite a knowledgeable uh, person, let's say. Uh, yeah, no play on words here. But yeah, and the magic is that after 3 days, by playing around, moving the parts, and having understood the contract fully, his subconscious mind that starts find the interesting bugs. That's quite a nice way to go around it. I do know someone that doesn't really draw, but he does try to understand the protocol fully and then kind of go for a walk, sleep on it, or as he likes saying, hallucinate some scenarios. Like, oh, what if I do that and that and that? What would happen? And then you try to prove it, and it may work, it may not work, but you're more likely to be creative when you actually know how parts of the protocol move together and how they're related. Even subconsciously, you might wake up some morning or be going to sleep at night. We all know this meme where you've forgotten something. No, no, you know that brain just above that girl that can't sleep. Should have put that here, maybe later. And this is how it works. And your goal is to actually find that arrow that could lead to a state where this difference between the desired behavior of the protocol and the actual behavior. So yes, apparently I haven't audited with Gerard, but it seems like he draws some extremely thorough diagrams and that it's very impressive. So that might be your thing. Of course, all the things I'm talking about, those are kind of personal to each and every one, and I'm mentioning them because that might click more than what you're currently doing, or that might give you some ideas if this is actually what you are currently doing.
Can I
So,
ask you something, brother? Um,
sorry, yes?
can I ask you something?
Ah, yes, of
I
course.
saw people talking about the state machine drawing a lot of times, but would you have a example you can show us, which is not too sensitive for you to show us?
Not really. And actually, I also,
Because it's really confusing when you say let's draw a state machine of what's happening. For me, at least, I don't know how others feel. It's quite confusing to
I
understand.
will I will share the tweet. I will share the tweet from Byte 32 a little later.
Awesome.
There are lots of arrows and such. Actually, let me write it down. Even on YouTube, you could put that on the comments. So Byte 32 and drawing state machine. And that might be very personal. I also used Miro. I didn't use PowerPoint, but I also went pen and paper, used Draw.io. It never really clicked for me personally. So this isn't one of the methods I really used. I
I
tried
see.
it, but it didn't click. But for some people, it does work wonders. So the different mental modes. This one will be interesting. So there are several modes. By modes, I mean how you are looking at the code. What's your intent, your way of tackling what's happening. So the first one would be the comparison mode. The comparison mode, it's the fact of taking like the function's name and compare it to what already exists in the wild or what the standard does. So like how you are accruing interest, as an example, or opening some positions or taking something, you you actually may want to compare what's being done on the current code you're auditing with what already exists, or even what vulnerabilities were found on such a thing. I didn't put it here, but you could even use Solodit. I believe everyone now should know about Solodit. Um, and actually use the different keywords and see what happened in the past. So there's that. You compare what's in front of you with what already exists. One way to go around it. The second one, I call it the mirror mode. In the code itself, usually when you've got some adding something function, like add liquidity, you've got some opposite function, like remove liquidity. And variable. So one of the ways to go around it is to look at those opposite functions and see uh, what are the difference between them. Recently, something that happened is the fact that on the adding part of the code, some collateral were being transferred, but on the remove one, the collateral wasn't transferred back to the user. Kinda, I'm oversimplifying. So that was a loss for the user. And by going mirror mode, that's actually something that would be super obvious. So there's that. Then there's something that lots of people will like in terms of bug bounty hunting or audit competitions. It's the speedrun mode. So mainly when you're auditing, there are three, I'm quoting Rajiv, three main areas of focus that are sensitive. There are the assets. So where's the money? What's happening to my money? The actors. So the power of the different roles or normal users, and the actions. This is way more vague and would take more time, but when and what can be done on what for whom. So yeah, combination of that. If you follow the money on a speedrun mode, you can go faster than if you go line by line and try to understand all of the code base and such. If you focus on the calls, the transfers of money from the user to the protocol, and things like that, the updates of balance. You follow the money. This is somehow a way to speedrun. So yeah, assets, actors, and actions. Another mode, black boxing mode. This is something I really like as a previous developer. Actually, that's something I really love, in fact. It's super useful on complicated code bases and little alpha on OpenSea, the $1 million contest from last year. One of the highs were found thanks to this method because, yeah, lots of assembly, it can be very complicated. But what if you understand the code by using the test and understand the test to understand the expected scenarios and play with them? So this is that you kind of imagine some different scenarios. You can look at coverage, what's being covered and such, and you use the test to poke at the code. It's especially easy nowadays with Foundry, very big game changer because it's quite easy to fuzz and sometimes you can catch some edge cases. And even if coverage can tell you that some lines were executed, they might have been um, run over just by a happy path. Sometimes it's that easy. And just take your machine gun and try to kill something. Can be it can be tiring, but this is very this is precious when your code base is very complicated, like math heavy or lots of assembly. You 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 can't, because sometimes it just happens. You are not clicking with the code and you're struggling to actually understand what's happening. um, you take the machine gun and you fuzz like there's no tomorrow. Um, so there's that. There's the what should happen mode. So that I'll compare it to the what shouldn't happen mode. Something I really love at Certora is that usually on audits there are two teams. The ones that are focusing on the specs, meaning the invariance, the properties, and what should happen in the system. And the tool itself will find the bugs, usually. Um, you could do that with fuzzing, but yeah, formal verification is more powerful. May take more time, but those are the tools. So there's the what should happen mode, and then the opposite one, the what shouldn't happen mode. Usually we go we are auditing with the what shouldn't happen mode, but it's actually quite useful to try to first understand the system, think about the invariants that shouldn't be broken, and what should really happen. Because sometimes the code doesn't even just it just doesn't work. So if there are some bugs that you can just facepalm yourself because it just doesn't work. So try to think first what should happen. Write down write down some questions and some ideas when you do that. So the what shouldn't happen mode, you try to find some flaws in the flow. Try to taint the state machine. Um, you might understand that a little later. This website will be up forever. Maybe I'll update some things, add a meme here and there, but you will always be able to access mindsets of auditing .netlify.app. Actually use the reveal.js here. But yeah, there's that. So if there's something you didn't understand, the slides by themselves are quite wordy. So yeah, find flaws in the flow, uh, manipulating the flow, try to taint the state machine. By you poke at the code, you fuzz it, you bend it to your will, you hallucinate scenarios, you use fear, like uh, make it as if you were the protocol's owner and use your fear, what you really don't want to see happen. And usually that directs you to the sensitive areas. Fear is quite powerful, even as a motivator. So yeah, use fear. What should happen and what shouldn't happen. And those are the different ways of really looking at the code. I believe you can see that those are all very different with different intents, and perhaps some people only do like the what shouldn't happen, but it's like too soon when you haven't even built a basic understanding of the protocol.
This is really
And
different, really innovative. Like I never thought about changing your view to different. Like the way I usually go is what shouldn't happen, and maybe a little bit of black boxing. But splitting like this is much more clear.
actually, when you're auditing like on contests and such, you basically don't have the time to do everything usually. But you have a little more time when you are in an auditing firm, and that's what also what I like with Sotora because yeah, even if I'm less focused on that, I still do it and talk about it with the other team. And I talked about this with them, and we both do a little bit of each, but each being focused on some way. So perhaps even by like being in a team, you can say, hey, why doesn't someone like look into the wild how the current implementation differs from what exists or what was found, what has been found in the past. Another one could be like I know that you are building a lot of teams in OpenSense that are tackling Code Arena, and that could actually be a way of repartitioning the workload. Someone maybe uh, comparing as a mirror. Someone might be like just focusing on assets, someone actors saying, "Oh, I can do that. Why I shouldn't? There's a lack of access control." Or, "Yeah, that user can edit the other user's state." You see? So when you're in a team, you can each focus on something because time is limited, and you are not even sure it will be lucrative in the end. But you can actually do all of them when you're in a firm. Um, which
How often you miss a problem that a colleague finds, and how does it
uh,
feel?
Actually, it feels good. You are kind of excited because you find things that they don't find. It's not a matter of skills, usually. It's not that you couldn't have found it. If it was a CTF and you were looking at the same code, maybe you wouldn't take the same amount of time, but you'd probably find the bug. The difficulty here is that when you're editing a code base, you are in a pool where you don't even know if there are fishes. So it's more like someone looked at such a function with such an intent and he found something because he tends to think that way, and you didn't because maybe you haven't even looked at that contract, and then you are both brainstorming on it and looking at it differently uh, with your own sets of skill, um, set of sets of skills. Excuse me. So for me, as an example, the black boxing mode, as an ex-developer, I tend to write some very thorough tests that are very for the well, some very complicated tests with lots of scenarios, lots of advanced cheat codes from Foundry, and I really love it. And then there are some beautiful console logging, and I present what's happening with the team in terms of, hey, I did this scenario and this scenario and this scenario here is what happened. This is a little bit odd, and they don't even need to look at the code. They just look at the output, and they wouldn't even need to know Foundry. You see, so that's a way of sharing the knowledge. So actually, it's quite a positive thing to be in a team when there's this sort of cooperation. You are not in competition with one another um, if you're a real team. Was that the question?
Yeah, yeah, it's just hard to get to that point, like there's always a spirit of competition, and especially in auditing, it always feels like a battle, like some sort of martial art. Like you need to know how to fight, and you're always being tested, and people come out with new exploits, complex contracts. Finding a team that motivates you, it makes you learn, and you're able to teach is something that really pushes you, I guess.
I think the basic mindset when you are learning is to um, actually believe that you don't know anything and that you're the stupidest guy in the team. Um, one, that will make you work extra hard to prove yourself, and two, you will actually want to learn from others instead of feeling like you're the most knowledgeable one, and that others will just steal from you your knowledge or make you lose time on the audits because you would have to kind of explain everything you are doing to them. I do believe that people should be around the same level when they're auditing, or someone could, I don't know, focus on writing the reports so that you're saving a little bit of time on it and you can explain the bugs to them so that they can write the report better. That's one way of having some more junior on the team, you see. But the mindset of cooperation in a team that can really make you go way further. I mean, there are some teams of people that are very, very highly skilled, and I know that they know that they each one are looking at the code differently, and sometimes even just the fact of bouncing the ideas make them get some new ideas to go even further. And there are some things that happen, some magic that just wouldn't happen alone. So it's fine to audit alone, but that's unlikely that you would like plan everything. Uh, because even top auditors would miss some things. You don't have an infinite time. There's one thing at some point, there's a way to call audits that I really liked from Sigma Prime's director. He said that those are time boxed security reviews. So with the concept of time box, you know that you're limited on time, and even if you're skilled, you may miss something. You don't have a year on your audits on the competition and such. So yeah, there's this concept of time, finding your strength, and try to be a positive force in a team, or even just by yourself when you are doing it by yourself. But definitely in a team you can learn a lot. That's something I've seen last year when I was, as I said before, plateauing pretty hard. Every time I was in a team and brainstorming with people, I felt like some walls were being destroyed, and so I started progressing again.
Makes total
So
sense,
that
bro.
that might be more directed toward intermediate auditors. Um, because when you're a beginner, there's just so much to consume, so many things happening everywhere all the time, that you could be already drowning into it. Or even as an intermediate, like you can say, I haven't read every report and such. Well, there are some auditors like Zach O'Bront or Gerard Persson, very, very highly skilled auditors. They don't read our reports. They may try to get some ideas here and there, but they don't do that. They've got a process, they know how to tackle the code, and they don't read all reports. Uh,
I want to add something on that because we had an
yeah,
interview recently with an auditor, Saxonism, and he was explaining how reading reports before can actually influence you badly. So ideally, you should first audit and then read the reports.
a little differently. You should audit and then read the report on what you've audited and see what you missed, or even something else, shadow audit, we'll say, something that was already audited where the report already exists. You can do that like on kind of any contest of Code Arena and compare what you found with what others have found. You can spend like a day on it. You don't need to spend a week. A day, like 8 hours, meaning could be enough. And you can actually train your speed this way and train to see what was in that guy's mind or that girl's mind, that warden's mind in Fun Arena, that happened to make them like reach that finding. And that's actually what Hola die Wild Fairy, always troublesome to say that, tweeted at some point not long ago, the fact of shadow auditing, something that already has the findings. And perhaps even you could find something and then report it on Immunify and get some bug bounty. Could happen, who knows? So really try to be the learner here. We are always learning, we are always challenging ourselves, and as soon as you believe you know too much or you're somewhere, you kind of stop progressing. You should always try to go forward. Um, so
But
there's that.
but how do we actually execute the next step? Because sometimes it's so hard. Like for me, I know all basic vectors, but as soon as I get into math, as soon as I get into complex code bases, gets really heavy. Like, and when auditing something you don't know, sometimes seems like you're blind. Like you can't see even like obvious stuff. So it's really hard to understand that one. You have stopped like progressing and knowing where to go.
This might be different for everyone, but I do understand because I felt it. You read something, you just don't know. Like you can understand the reports, but you just don't know what made people go there. It's because I believe I said it in a previous audit. You focus, not you especially, but it's because people tend to focus on the answers, like a list of bugs or finding, while you should be focusing on the questions, the hidden things that aren't written on the report. It's what were the questions? Because usually when there's a bug, it's not like, oh, I saw a line of code and there's this bug, and you feel stupid when you see someone reporting an awesome bug because you feel like they just knew there was something in that math and they understood everything. Um, Usually, it's a step-by-step approach. You're getting curious on some place that might be complex and such, and you're actually like poking at the code, drawing maybe, um, hallucinating what's happening, and everyone might have a different path about it. But when you're reading a report, maybe you should try to find your own path from the original reason, or if it's not explained, how you could have just try to find how you could have found the bug yourself. That's a lot of effort because it's not written, it's very personal, it's different from one person to another, and it's a lot of work. You might spend a day or two, even more, on just one bug, but this is how you go forward at some point. Well, you might stagnate for a month, but why won't you spend 2 or 3 days understanding how your internal process works a little more? That will just go faster with time. And next time you might have some triggers by finding something similar, and then you will know, because the code base will be different, how you would go about it to dig in, to go down the rabbit hole. That rabbit hole concept, it's a super important one. You've got some spider sense on something, or you've seen something weird, or there's something that you don't like, that's suspicious, and then you dig, you try to poke at it. You may get somewhere, you may not get somewhere. You may feel like it's impossible to reach a rectable state, discuss it with your teammate, and then someone would just say, well, if you edit that there, you could reach such a state, and then you can both take it from there. It's the hidden meaning behind the reports. All that they aren't written. You only have the answers presented. You don't have the questions that went through the auditor's mind, and you will never have it. But you can try to have your own. Like, okay, there's this answer. Like as if you were reading a CTF. How I would have gone to actually find a path to that, and it will take a lot of time. But this is how you do. At some point, progress slows down. It's normal. Uh, it's frustrating, but it's normal. And this is a matter of knowing what clicks for you and how you go down the rabbit hole.
Bro, thank you so much. This is so much alpha. Like I can really even believe it. Thank you so much.
This isn't really alpha. This is like, well, I'm writing it here, but this is something that everyone does, like unconsciously. At some point, some people, it feels like in a matter of some weeks, they just go from intermediate to advanced because somehow things started to click and they start to find bugs, and they can't even explain why it's different because they have the same knowledge about the basic attack vectors and such, but they just think differently about how to attack the code or how they like to do it. Or yeah, there's that. They have a different process.
Nice.
Oh, next one. Nice questions, by the way.
Thank you, brother.
Then I will talk a lot about something. It's the fact of questioning, always, because it's always about questions. I may have already told some things, but I will still present it nevertheless. So there's something that not all people are aware of, but when you're asking questions, you're opening your mind. And when you're giving answers or assuming things, some assumptions, you are closing it. You're closing some paths. So actually, when someone gives you an answer, try to come up with questions. When you're reading something, instead of telling yourself, oh, okay, it's doing that, uh, try to question. Of course, you cannot ask all questions in the world on every line by line, but you may get some questions you may want to ask at some point, and this is what you should work on, because when you keep asking why, and you actually revert to how you were as a kid, as a child, but everyone kept telling you shut up, and then you just kind of stop progressing, I'd say, or stop being as much as a sponge as a kid. This is how you go down the rabbit hole. You keep asking why. Okay, there's this, but why? And oh, there's that, but why? And you just incrementally go deeper and deeper. It's not like, as I said previously, you see a line and you know there's a bug and you find the whole scenario. It's at least for me, really a step-by-step approach of brainstorming and keep asking questions, forcing yourself to ask why, what if this and that. So always be questioning. Uh, and yeah, maybe at some point you can drop it on some functions because you believe that you've asked every reasonable questions you could have asked. But something that would be lacking is the questioning mindset. Um, and yeah, as you may see here, there are four whole slides on this. So I'll continue. Some quote from Zuckerbrand. Yeah, I really like the guy. He also helped me a lot when I was job hunting. Really great. Love him. Lots of love. So you need to train your mental triggers and find creative ways to poke at things. So I've been talking about being creative, meaning asking yourself questions, hallucinating when you've built some understanding of the code, and poking at things, meaning like with test or drawing. And there's also all these sentences kind of summarizing everything. The fact of training your mental triggers, because you cannot ask every question in existence. You, with experience and when you get faster, you can try to ask the right questions, and then find your own ways to go down the rabbit hole and not close your mind to some things that may happen. Um, it may be that it's been a month that you are on a bug bounty hunting target and you are not finding anything, and you might be frustrated. But who knows? Maybe the day after you will find something, because yeah, it's so hard keeping track of everything and all the paths. You yeah need to build your experience on that. So it's not exactly a quote from him. He said some things, and I summarized it into that. But he could have said it, and he kind of said it. Um, so yeah, train your mental triggers, find creative ways to poke at things. Always be questioning. And then I will talk about some proposition. There's a guy I really like. It's Professor Feynman. He's got a technique to kind of learn everything. He's very famous for that. He says that if you want to master something, teach it. And he's actually very renowned for explaining complex things like very simple with analogies, stories, and such. So the proposition when you're tackling a code base to kind of understand the code and cycle between understanding and questioning is to first read something, let's say yeah, an external function somewhere where there's a transfer of funds, anything. Read a function, read something. I called it something because this can apply to anything. So read that something. Raise your head or close your eyes, I don't care, and try to explain it. You can do that line by line, you can do that on a whole function. I don't care. You read something, close your eyes, and try to explain it. And actually, when you're explaining it, the more you're using words, the more it's likely that you haven't really understood it. So it's actually quite helpful to summarize it, simplify it as much as possible, and create some stories, scenarios, and analogies about what's happening. Um,
So you mean
we are all,
the more words, the less understanding?
sorry, can you repeat? The more words? No, 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 sorry. You should use less words. I mean, you should be able to go step by step with a few keywords and explain what's happening. If there's an external function as an example, um, and you are auditing it, it's an entry point of the system. You should be able, if someone asks you, hey, what's happening in add liquidity? If you cannot even simply, just in the simplest term, explain what's happening, like, yeah, it's approving that and then transferring that and then minting you something, then emitting an event, and then you are done. Um, you kind of didn't understand much about it. So it's just try to explain in a high level view what's happening in a function, on a line, in a modifier, in the whole contract, the protocol itself, you see. Simplify it because you are more likely even yourself to remember what's happening in that contract, especially when there are lots of lines of code. If it's actually something simple that you can explain, you could even have someone or a doc um, who you're trying to explain the protocol or the function to. And That's what I'm saying. The story scenarios, you could say, well, just imagine I'm someone who have too much money. I want to stake it somewhere to earn some profit. Well, I can use that, and then a year later, yeah, I would have some profit. And if I do that, you see how you go about it, how it's working. You're more likely to remember a story than just data or lines of codes, because this is how humans are built. We remember stories every time, and we love analogies and we love Alice and Bob. Um, that's it. So you read something and you try to explain it. Then what you do, you reread that something again, or maybe you failed to explain it, but the what you do here is you try to identify the gaps in your knowledge because you're very unlikely to read a function once, uh, even line by line, and then really be able to explain what's happening. Uh, so there's that. You read, let's say, a function, you explain it as simply as possible, as if you were explaining it to a 5 years old, and then you reread that function to identify what you lacked, what maybe should have happened. And when you're trying to identify those gaps in knowledge, you can actually start writing down questions like, why didn't I remember that? Or, well, hasn't it forgotten to like do that? Or what if I'm actually taking money for someone else or claiming money for someone else? And you keep your questions on the side in, I'll talk about it later, but in a like .note.md file. That's a proposition. But that's it. It's a cycle of explaining something and then reread it again to identify gaps in knowledge and then explain it again. And when you can explain it simply enough, you've kind of understood it. Maybe not as deeply as humanly possible, but you may feel like you're ready to move on to something else. And you are more likely to hallucinate some scenarios if you know in even the simplest terms what's actually going on in that contract you're auditing. So that's a proposition, something I really like. And this, I'm not so sure I will be reading everything because people can access it, but I've actually built some kind of question list. Sorry. Uh, yeah, getting confused here. Some question list. Yeah, maybe I'll read it. Like you can. All right. Yeah, and some people aren't looking at the slides, so like some non-exhaustive list of creativity triggering questions and statements when you're like looking at your code. It's like, can you change someone else's state? Like doing something for someone. Uh, can you influence someone else's state? Like manipulating rewards and such, but manipulating something used somewhere by someone. Those are really general questions, but you do need to have some questions somewhere that you would hallucinate at some point. If some contracts are being saved or supplied or as a user input, can you supply a malicious contract to the system? Can you supply mismatched input like they expect a token ID and they will be using a user somehow? You're doing something for someone, I don't know. And if you're mismatching token ID with the user, what will happen? What if you supply unexpected inputs, like they're expecting some future timestamp, some redemption time, um, and you supply something of the past, a past timestamp. So what would happen? Can something silently pass instead of reverting? Like the expected amount, I just pass in zero. What's happening? Maybe it will silently pass, and maybe you can claim something at maturity for a reward. I don't know. It's just a question. I don't need the answers. Not yet. And can someone be prevented from transferring their funds to the contract? Like if there are some conditions for using the contract, maybe you can front run them by transferring one way of such token from the contract, and they won't be passing a test, so they won't be able to use the protocol. Can rewards be blocked, reduced, delayed, inflated, claimed too early, claimed for someone else? Rewards are really a sensitive point, but yeah, you do need to have some questions. Can funds get stolen, locked, stuck? You need to think about it. Those are actually pretty fun, the next ones. So are state variables updated as they should be? Because sometimes, there might be some rounding errors or not updating the right thing, um, things like that, as an example. Or are state variables updated at all when they should be? Because yes, sometimes there are some forgotten lines of codes, and even if you go line by line, you might not. Uh, it's easier to catch with mirror mode, but you might see that something should have been updated here. And I've seen several times some unique highs because the ones auditing actually understood that something was forgotten here. And it's very hard to see that something isn't here. You can analyze a line of code, but it's very hard analyzing, uh, like knowing a line should have been here to update something. Um, and so are states variables updated at all, as they should be, when they should be? And this is what I was talking about on those same at all. Yeah, updated at all, or when they should be. Maybe they're updated when they shouldn't be, um, or still updated at some point where they just should be locked. I don't know. I don't care. Those are questions. Those aren't answers. There aren't findings. It's just things that could go through your head when you're auditing. So then I'm trying some things like action will revert if. So sometimes it's helpful not to really ask questions, but have some sentences where you can replace some keywords like action, condition, user, and such. So what if I say action will revert if, and you can say, oh, what if this reverts if I just send some money there or do this action? So action will revert if condition. Action will silently not work on action, user, asset, state if condition. Action will still work on action, user, state, asset, even if condition. Yeah, sometimes you can claim rewards twice, so it will still work even if you've already claimed. Um, or if action is or is not done before action 2, then an action, a user, and asset, or state can be negatively impacted or positively impacted, and you've manipulated some mechanism. Is this action leaving some excess funds in the contract? Is something missing in the action contract? You can see that I'm talking a lot about missing things in functions and contract, but sometimes, like you are calling some contract, and if you are sending some excess money, they might send you the excess money back if you haven't implemented a fallback function or a receive function that would be payable. You wouldn't be able actually to send that excess, and maybe you could be front run with one way somehow, someone depositing for you, and then what's being used makes you send one excess way, but the contract it cannot receive that excess way, so you've been griefed. You see, talking about examples from some reports, but that might be helpful. Yeah, you see, those are stories. Does action even work correctly? Does action even work at all? Uh, yeah, I'm amazed sometimes at this one. It's yeah, I won't talk about it, but sometimes it's very fun. Functions just don't work at all. Uh, yeah, don't trust them. And even if the function is tested, what are they testing? So you see, even auditing the test sometimes, especially when the code is very hard to tackle, it can be very helpful. And when you're building some flows, some expected flows, you can actually understand a little more what should be happening in that protocol and try to manipulate some things to see if I do this, then is it still happening how it should? Um, it can actually be done several times, as I said, claiming several times because maybe there's a state update that's been forgotten or something. What about such an edge case in the input? Min, max, zero, lots of edge cases. What about corner case in the flow? Like you haven't even staked or opened something and you're claiming or closing, what's happening? Those are the edge cases. So there are the questions, that actually can help in your creativity. You just wonder what would happen if, and that gets you going. Instead of, oh, I've looked at the code and I didn't see any like reentrancy. I've looked at the check effect interaction pattern. Well, there are no unchecked statements. What could happen with there's unlikely to be any overflows. What can I find here? It's just a code that says that it does this, so probably that it does it. What can I do? Well, ask questions, simplify the system, and play around with it. You should be having fun playing around with it. It can even be more fun when you're in a team. Uh, I've been saying that a lot, but I really love being in a team. That's something I really needed. Really I've been needing that for a while, so I'm very happy at Satora. It's especially good when people are clever, because lots of backs and forths. But it can make the experience way funnier and make you progress even faster. So you might be like giving up on some immediate money on the contest, but maybe on the next contest, from what you've learned, you'd go even faster or find things you wouldn't have found if you didn't learn from others. And you can even learn about yourself when you are talking with the others, um, because then you know what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and identifying those are, yeah, they're kind of key to progressing. So there's that. We are already past the 1 hour mark.
Yo, Dravee,
So someone
I have
speaking?
something to say, man. Yeah, like
Anon.
I want to ask questions. I want to ask questions, but the presentation is so good. Like I can't even interrupt you, man. So good. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe questions at the end because it's taking longer than expected, and I wouldn't
Man,
want the
take,
video to be
take
too
your
long.
time. Explain as much as you want.
So, poking around, been talking about it. There are some things, again, I think people are kind of shy because when they're auditing a code, it's like this glass statue or something that they don't want to touch. They might add some comment or audit tags from inline bookmarks, Solidity Visual Developer, but it's really okay to edit the code and play around with it as you revert at some point. It's really okay to add some console logs, and even more if you're using a local Git branch to save your work or a private repo to collaborate, and each and everyone would have their own private repo, not repo, sorry, branch. You you can actually share your ideas. So there would be some comments, the audit tags, but also what you've edited, because yeah, play around with the code. Just play around with the code, add console logs, deepen your understanding. It's really okay to do that. It's just that when you are reporting, Yes, there's the fact that the line numbers won't match, but then just go on GitHub and the reporting part when you're writing it down, it's not the thing that's supposed to limit you in terms of not playing around the code and not touching it. Sometimes I just delete require statements. Sometimes I add require statements, and they might even break some existing tests. Uh, Play around. So sometimes fix the value because you want the state to actually be this way. Play around with the code. It's okay. You've got the right to do that on your computer. It's okay. There are some people that even have some scripts that strip all comments of the code and then format it and such. So y- somehow you need to own the code. So if you treat it like something that shouldn't be touched, yes, it can work, of course. But personally, and some other people I know really like to bend it to your will, to our will. So there's that. It's really okay to edit the code. I repeat it because I spent really a lot of time treating it like something where I should only add comments on the line, not even returning and adding some new lines. It's okay. It's okay if it makes you understand the code more and find some bugs. It's more important. And the three Ps, something I really love from management days. So it's people, process, and product. In that order of importance, I'm applying it to auditing here. Um, People, your teammates, you need to make use of all the tools that make the machines work. You see, that make everything work. The people, they are your teammates and they are your most powerful tool, especially when you're discussing. Sometimes you may be even discussing for 2 or 3 hours just around one function that may be doing something, and maybe there will be a bug, maybe there won't be a bug, but you can actually enjoy going down the rabbit hole with friends, let's say, your teammates. It helps when you actually like each other. Um, then the process, well, it's what I'm talking about, the mindsets for creativity. It's very personal. It's your strengths. It's how you do you. And then products, the tools. So this can be very powerful too. It's like writing your own tests, pausing, using formal verification, and all those are the three Ps that are very important, your main tools when you're auditing. Uh, it's not just people, not just how you're tackling the code, or not just Foundry or the certain approval. It's all of that at the same time. So, as I said, because we're actually talking about poking around, use fuzzing and invariant testing. Coverage is your friend. That's something I keep talking about, but I feel like people aren't very hooked. But there's this little command from Foundry, forge coverage, where you generate a lcov report. And this, when you do that, there's a lcov file that gets generated um, in uh, in your um, directory, in your codes directory, and then you can use that VS Code extension called coverage gutters. And what it does when you've got a lcov file is that it highlights in green the code that actually has been covered, in red what hasn't at all been covered. And guess what? When something is in red, it's very likely that you will, well, more likely that you will find a bug. Even in green, well, yes, when I code actually, my VS Code, I'm colored as such. The yellow one, usually you see them on the yellow color, I'll show it. It's actually on conditions, because that means the coverage, the test, tested one condition but not the other. You see? So this, when you're auditing and using the coverage, as I said, coverage is your friend. Use coverage gutters, a VS Code extension. You can actually see what's more likely to have bugs because it's not even covered, you see, or badly covered. So I
I
really
had
don't
a
know
quick
why it's
question.
not picking from
That's
who.
okay. Um, yeah, does this support like Foundry, hard hat? Like, what does this extension actually support in terms of test
Both,
coverage? Both? That's
both,
awesome. Okay.
because as I said here, it's something with coverage. You don't just do fault coverage and have things in your console. You add this little dash dash
Mm,
report lcov, and it generates what's called a lcov file. Can't really tell you what it means, but that's it. You've generated your lcov. It's also possible with the hard hat coverage extension. I believe it's an extra extension. And when you've got this code here, it's Python. On the other side, we've got Solidity. You, yeah, it basically works for anything. Because in the end, what it says is that on such a line of code, well, if you're editing the code as I encouraged you to, it might highlight the wrong lines because you'd need to just generate a new coverage report. It will say at such a line it's not covered, at such line it's covered. So if you're playing with your code, be sure to be using the latest lcov file from how your code actually is currently is.
pretty helpful. Thank you for answering that.
So yeah, it works with everything. So you could play with it. You could go to a mindset of auditing .netlify.app on this eighth page. You can press escape to browse around. It's reveal.js, really love it. And just click on coverage gutters. So there's that. Coverage is your friend when you're poking around the code. Something that's kind of helpful is to add one positive assert and one negative assert. Well, I'm saying assert, but I prefer require statements because revert string and such. And kind of try to write down what should happen and what shouldn't happen. So that can help you depend your understanding. You see, and that's a proposition. Can take time. You can do it. You cannot do it. It's just different ways of poking around your code. So test the edge cases. Shuffle the flow of operations. Something else I really, really, really love is the snapshot cheat code from Foundry. I believe not everyone knows about it, but this cheat code, it's the fact of saving with the end of snapshot the state, doing some things, even going forward in time and such, and then reverting to the state you saved, and then doing something else. And then you can even compare outputs from what you did before such a thing and what happens after. As an example, you could compare like what if I'm supplying, let's say, one ether to the system and then revert and try to supply 0 0.5 ether to the system and compare how much you've gained. Maybe then you'd be best opening lots of small positions. I don't know, but you can actually compare the outputs by using snapshots and reverting to the snapshot to get back the state and compare the operations you're doing and really see what's happening between those two. That's especially helpful with front-running attacks because you compare like the normal flow with what if someone calls that and then you do your normal flow. Um, that's helpful. That's especially helpful with that, or even denial of services or grief attacks because probably some things wouldn't even work anymore. And yeah, I really love the snapshot cheat code. So there's that. Main tools to poke around the code, and of course, sliver to determine sensitive areas. Because even if there are lots of false positives, it still flags the lack of application of check effect interaction patterns. It flags some external calls or things that happen in a loop, things like that. So still use Slither and look at the false positives. you shouldn't miss what's the outputs. So yeah, propositions, add a little notes.md file when you're auditing and keep track of what you're doing. Make a checklist on the fly when you've got some ideas and questions, and then you can go through it later. Write detailed POCs because, as Alex the Entrepreneur, who is a famous judge on Code Arena, said, if you can't write a POC, the finding's probably not valid. So yeah, to level up, in Foundry as an example, there's the Solidity sandbox from Aurelian. See his branch here, where there are lots of things happening, like I don't know, bytes casting, and you can get a lot of example of his checkbox, uh, checkbox, sandbox. Sorry, I've been talking for a while, and yeah, play around with it, try to level up, see what others are doing. There's DeFi hack labs. I believe nowadays it's pretty known when you're reproducing some past hacks. And when I say past, they can be pretty recent. This one is 3 days old. Um, Actually get into it. An article I really love about invariant testing with Foundry by HostFact. Has he been interviewed yet or not
Yes,
yet?
we have his interview is coming up. I think today or tomorrow on YouTube.
All right. So actually, he's got the most easiest to understand article about invariant testing with Foundry, and yeah, really loved it. Go through it.
Bro, let me tell you something. We're going to 1 hour and 10. You've been talking a lot, so what maybe we could do is you can kind of close with something that you think is important to notice if you want, and then we can open for questions. Otherwise, we're gonna be using like 3 hours of your time, and unless you
You
feel,
know,
go on.
maybe I will speed run because the
Awesome,
slides are kinda enough by themselves. Oh, sorry.
awesome.
The slides
I
are
mean,
kinda enough by themselves. You
awesome.
can go through
It's
it.
not about me, okay? It's about you. I mean, what I don't want is you to get even more tired, you know. So
Oh,
it's on you.
I'm
You
having
decide.
fun, don't worry. But yeah, long videos usually not that good. But yeah, I'm not so far from the end. So now I'll talk about specific mindsets. Like the one I use and I know DevTooligan use is what I call BFS, breadth first search. Is the fact of you are not diving deep like as soon as possible. You actually make a lot of assumptions on what's happening, and I feel like this iterative approach helps in having questions in what's happening. Like if you're assuming an internal function is doing something, you can write it as some things to check that if it's really doing what you're assuming, and then you can progressively rise in complexity with that. You you go with the external functions, everything that's high level first. So yeah, can talk a little more about this from experience. It's just that personally, I cannot understand everything in one go. Maybe I'm just not that clever, but I need to simplify it and then rise in complexity. So solution, understanding the code incrementally from most simplify pseudocode that you can explain to your little sister or brother, I don't know, or just a kid you find outside. Uh, Don't be a creep. And then go down to the smallest detail. Sorry, someone's laughing. So yeah, you start with the entry points of the system. You write down only the important operations as pseudocode, meaning the external calls, the state updates, the evil calculation. You at first you don't really care about oh, there is this require statement, or it's emitting this event, or it's assigning this to this variable. Uh, don't care about that. Just try to simplify it and say what are the main things happening here. And then on your second, third, and such run, you can add those, but not on your paper. I mean, for that step of only explaining as simply as possible, I actually go pen and paper with it, and often I take the paper on such contract and such contract to read it again, because like how many steps can there be? Like a maximum of 10. And actually just knowing that there are 10 main things happening in a function, and that would already be quite a complicated function, it's very helpful. It gets you familiar with what's happening. There's that. Then incrementally you do that with the internal functions where you've built assumptions and curiosity on, and your goal is to, at first, really, it's incremental. You don't have to understand everything. It's just to be able to explain the most important things happening. Is there, if there's a big math operation, just um, just say that there's a big math operations that's doing that. You will go into it later. And then this is when you're familiar enough with the code, you start poking at it where some things are complex or suspicious. Maybe there's a misimplementation. Maybe it's not where it should be. Maybe the flow isn't right. This. So this is where creativity can start, at least for me. And little reminder, I've been saying that a lot, but you can change the code and add some console logs to deepen your understanding. You can add require statements and even see if some existing tests are getting broken. Very important. Don't be shy with the code. This one will be very fast. Depth first search. Assumed users. There's Jackson Kelly. And he actually goes deep into the dependencies first, the lower level functions, the internal ones and such. And I really can't say much about it because it's way too unnatural, and I'm mentioning it, but I really can't understand how people can do that, because that's just too many details at once for me. But this might be for you who is listening, your holy grail, because maybe you like going deep first and then high level functions are clicking more because you know what's happening into each and every little calls. Then this one, quite nice. This is for speedrunning. I'm close to the end, by the way, not so far. So assumed user Sam Cizison, maybe some people know about him. I don't know. Well, you should. Zach O'Brant and Mujit Gupta. You find a sync, so it means something important happening, an important operation that shouldn't be tainted. Money being transferred, your balance being increased, something like that. And you walk backward, so you are not going line by line from the entry points. You are not doing that. This is one of the speed running ways, or one of the ways to tackle bug bounty programs. You are walking backward from the important operations. And there's this sync, important operation, and you try to find a path where the data that goes to this sync can be tainted somehow by the user, by an attacker. In fact, you use fear to try to understand what state shouldn't be reached, and you really work in reverse to prove that this state that shouldn't be reached can be reached. There are some talks with Zach O'Brant talking with Trust, actually. And when they brainstorm, this is what he says. At some point, he can feel like, oh, this state isn't reachable. I can't go there. So, yeah, by walking backward, I believe there's no vulnerability here. And then Trust apparently is magical to find some paths. And they end up finding some very high severity bug that way. Sorry. Oh, oh, I was in BFS, you know? Yeah, this one, I understand it. It's nice for speedrunning, but I have a limited success with it, very limited. So yeah, you can see some superstars really clicking with that. It's not my case. So this is what I'm saying. This is very an individual thing. You need to enjoy this and do it your way. Um, yeah, actually. This one, nice. Re-implementing things your way. Assumed users, see Michel. Number one on Code Arena. This one is like you go about the code on how you would implement such or such function. You compare the actual implementation with how you would have implemented it. And this method isn't given to anyone. You need an amazing amount of experience and intuition. I'm certainly not ready for such a thing. Even if I try to do it, I'm already sometimes struggling to understand what's happening. So implementing things like knowing I could do better than the developer, it's yeah, that's a millionaire's dream. Consistently and have result, you're pretty much at the level of the number one of Code Arena, and you should be a LSO at Spearbit. So that was that. Conclusion. Of course, you are free to use everything if you've got the time. It takes time, it takes luck, and it takes experience. But the most important thing is that you see what works for you and how you enjoy doing it, because it's mentally tiring, and if you are not enjoying it, you will just be exhausted all the time. Actually, yeah, you do need to enjoy auditing. Yeah, newsflash. And that was it.
Bro, you're amazing. Thank you so
How
much. That was so much alpha, you know. I mean, I I have to say this is probably the best presentation we did so far. So thank you so much for putting the time, putting the effort, and
I
go on.
yeah, I wanted to have that out because it really helped me a lot. Well, those are my notes that weren't organized, but I struggled a lot of time. You know, some people, I feel like they come into this space, and in a matter of months, they become superstars. And I just feel like so many times I'm hitting walls and I stop progressing. This subject, really studying not everyone, but as many people as I could, it really helped me a lot in understanding what I need to keep on going and progressing. And I really wanted to share that with the ecosystem because it was never said before and it was never written down. So yeah, I had it at heart, so I wanted to have it out and made the extra effort to have some websites, some support, some slides and such, and even the talk, so that some people could even listen to that maybe several times in their car and such.
Thank you so much.
So
I mean,
thank you too for the opportunity to present.
no, imagine. Thank you so much. I mean, this is amazing, and I'll make a really nice Twitter post about it, and I'll also put out the website and everything we used. Now, what I want to do, if you have time, is open a little bit for questions. So I invited everyone to speak, and this is your chance to ask a really shady developer. If do you have time, or do you need to go? I mean, it's okay.
Oh, I'm okay, I
Yeah,
guess.
okay, no problem.
But first, I'm really sorry it took so long. People who usually do that.
No, bro. Was well worth the desert, the wait. So, guys, feel free to make questions to our friend Dravee.
I'm just saying thank you, man. I'm gonna say it's one of the most like thorough presentations I ever had. Like this is one of the best sessions in Open Sense. Thank you for your effort and your time.
Thanks.
Because they are a little bit shy, sometimes I need to push. So let me try. Pita, you have a question, or Alex? Max. Max has a question for sure.
No, I thought that was. I'm actually pretty happy with that. I feel like he explained a lot of different methodologies, and I asked the one question I had. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Max. What about
I
Chris?
had a
Chris?
question.
Oh, go on.
Hi. Hey, Dravee. Great presentation. Uh, I want to ask why is red depth first and natural to you?
Oh, wow. I kind of said it a little before, but sometimes, and that was really one of my struggles, and I believe misanthropic. This is how you pronounce it,
Just call me Miss.
Miss, right? Yeah, Milady, Miss Milady. All right,
Milady.
Milady Miss, Milady Miss. Sorry, just little joke. So why? Because the thing is, it's very easy to get overwhelmed on a code base, and going deep first when I haven't yet built like at least the high level understanding, or going at it incrementally, like I said in BFS, is just too much for me. And going into the internal functions, sometimes you can find bugs, but they wouldn't even be in scope because how things are used. Uh, I mean, the states wouldn't even be reachable, you see. So this would be QA. Going deep first, it just doesn't click because it's too much into details too soon while I'm just not understanding what's happening. Very hard to
Yeah,
explain.
yeah. I mean, if one reads the docs first, I mean, there are some auditors doing actually the depth
Mhm.
first, like they check the small blocks, and then they build the big blocks, and then bigger blocks still they have the highest level picture, you know. So I don't know, maybe just because when you say depth first, maybe just I was a bit confused. Like
Hmm.
you look at a high level function, and then you start going down the call trace like every function until you hit the last library. I don't mean it like that. I mean it more look at every library, check that everything is okay. I mean in a full audit, and
Yeah,
then go
this is
go
actually,
up
yes,
the
yeah, you're
levels.
right. I've heard kind of both, like, yeah, you're hitting some little functions and then you go into it and understand it fully, or start from the libraries and internal function calls. Yeah, I've heard both. This is starting from the bottom, then you get here, kind of.
Really nice. Who has a question?
Sorry,
Ubermatch.
first, have I answered your question, kind of, Bahurum?
Yes, yes, that's fine. Just wanted to have your view on it because yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah, I
clarify.
didn't
I wanted to
really.
clarify about this two kind
I
of
did, yes, I
depth
didn't really talk
first.
about it. And you are right, because as I said, I cannot really talk much about it because it just feels so weird. But maybe for you, I don't know, someone else, actually
Yeah,
going
that
deep first,
yeah, I was
and then you
surprised.
understand, yeah, it can be that way, and it's fine, and there are top auditors that way, and it's very fine. It's just not, it's not a propaganda. It's just not how things can start clicking for me or how I have fun. If you are too deep into, if I go too deep into the libraries and such first, I don't know, I kind of lose the initial enthusiasm and energy, and then I'm too tired. But maybe
I
some
see.
people have the energy to do that first, and then it's a little more brainless to simplify the high level functions.
Yeah,
Everything's
I
valid
see.
as long as it clicks.
Okay, thank you for your
Mhm.
answer.
Next.
I'd like to ask a question. If you were to start over, would you like trying to find peers or maybe some more knowledgeable mentor? Maybe how would you do that?
You mean if I were to start again?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, it's a little hard to answer that. And maybe I should have talked a little more about that, but I don't feel at all. I've talked about the benefits of being in a team, but I really don't feel like, yeah, dog out, dog out. Yeah. I don't feel like going, like being in a team at first would be as beneficial as making a first pass yourself. the main benefit, like even when we are auditing, is to do things our own way and then compare our strength. First there's your part of the work, your step, and then you break through some things you couldn't have reached by yourself. But starting with others right off the beginning, because I was alone at first, maybe I would have relied too much on others. While when you're starting to stagnate, stop progressing, it can be beneficial because this is where you actually see what you couldn't have seen before. And as I said before, at first, when you're just starting, uh, this space is very overwhelming uh, with information, bugs, reports. It wasn't as much the case before, but this is very true. Lots of things to learn even by yourself. You need to do your part of the work. So if I were to start again, I wouldn't have done things differently because I needed to do my part, hit my walls, try to find ways of breaking through that wall, understanding what others were doing, and then teaming up. I wouldn't have started right in the beginning in a firm. I would have proven myself, found how far I could go by myself, as I did, and then try to see if this would have been beneficial for me to be in a team to really progress faster. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, just uh, one small extra question. So, would you prefer the team to be like everyone peers, everyone equal, or maybe some gradation? So some person is more experienced, some person are less experienced. So like there is a lead and there are
Yeah.
other.
Well, usually there's a difference. I like it when everyone's knowledgeable. Like everyone is senior security researcher level from Spearbit. When there are LSRs, the lead superstar level ones, they don't necessarily have the time for you. You can ask some questions and such, but they don't necessarily have the time for you, and they can like front run you in terms of findings. So you don't necessarily get the time to prove yourself sometimes. I actually prefer to be with other people of around my level, experienced one, because when there's this discrepancy, you're kind of tagging along and getting frustrated because you couldn't do your part, as I said first, before talking with the team. If someone just goes on and find everything, you might even like get depressed because you feel like you aren't finding anything and there are so many things being found and you're just sitting here not having the opportunity to prove yourself. It's kind of important to just have people at the same level and maybe at some point some experienced one or everyone has their strength or tackling something. This is what I prefer personally to progress.
Thank you.
What about our friend Chris? You have a question?
Yeah, I do have one.
Good.
Okay, so like what would you suggest if someone is like feeling too overwhelmed with the resources? Like there are lots of
Too many
resources out there.
things.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, I think someone talked and front ran you.
So I was asking like what do you like suggest someone if like they feel too overwhelmed with the resources? Like there's a lots of audit reports out there, solo reports, so many of tips out there for starters. What would you suggest someone if they feel too overwhelmed with the resources?
Yeah, that one I'm very sorry about it, but you kind of need to consume them. Not all of them, but and there are some structured way to consume them, but I'm really sorry about it. But it will take months of consuming the information, and even when you get intermediate or advanced, there are things you might not know, some alphas, some practices, some things up to date, but. I'm really sorry. You need to have some time to focus on learning it and have some like balance between learning and practicing. Because only theory well, it helps, but you will hit a wall, and only practice you kind of will just be doing what you know how to do. So there's a balance. It takes time. There's no secret. It just takes a lot of time. Maybe if you learn faster, you can be a little faster. Um, but maybe the only kind of secret is when you're tackling a code base and really trying to go deep in it. Only focus on the knowledge that's after you've got the basics, let's say. Only focus on the knowledge that is related to what you're auditing. Um, don't focus on NFT stuff, marketplaces and such. If you are on a EMM or if it's a lending protocol, don't be focusing on anything else. Just take the time if you got the opportunity to have a code base that is doing something, is in a category of project. Look around at what's happening in others that have similar functions, similar names. What kind of bugs happened, and then you get experience in that. If as an example, there are lots of compound forks, well, you can read some things about compound and then audit them, or even take a bug bounty target with that, and kind of focus your knowledge. You cannot know everything at once. It takes a lot of time, and yeah, that's about that. I'm very sorry about it.
So basically, what you're trying to say is organize the things you are getting and try what works for you, right?
Yes, you need to be again having fun. So the most fun is like you're auditing something like on Code Arena. It's an open platform, so it's fun. And yeah, try to learn as much as possible on the subject you're auditing. Don't hop from one to another. Auditing for just one day on every project. I did it at some point. You aren't progressing. You're just speed running and doing what you know how to do. You actually need to progress when you're auditing. You need to be learning something, even if it's by researching other code bases or comparing your knowledge or brainstorming or having questions for later about how this is supposed to work in such category of DeFi project and such. It will just take time, and you won't be able to know everything at the same time. But it gets better when you get faster. Yeah, it's very hard being an
Gotcha.
auditor.
Gotcha. Thank you, Adi.
I think there is a question in the chat.
Oh,
While auditing a
okay.
large code base, how do you keep tracking of everything like state updates, function interaction? Do you use any tool to have it handy to think on what? Ah, kinda. Yeah, I am one of the boat racers on Code Arena, and there are some ports that aren't in the code in the boat race that do help me and output a lot of false positives that help me kind of focus on things happening. And yeah, I do generate some kind of checklist, not exactly that I go through at the end to be sure I didn't miss something. Um, but no, at first, if you are supposed to audit the whole large code base, like it's your work and you need to do everything to go through everything that's in scope, uh, yeah, it will just take a lot of time, and you need to simplify it as much as possible. And keeping track of everything, yeah, super hard, pen and paper, and focus on one thing at a time, one contract, one set of entry points and things related to one another. It's hard. It's one of the things I don't like. I actually prefer smaller code bases on Code Arena as an example because you are more likely to progress instead of getting overwhelmed. Uh, but yeah, usually you can even see some top auditors saying that on very large code bases, on audit contests, they actually just focus on a port that feels like could be sensitive or things are happening and things could be suspicious, or they don't want something bad happening there. But you cannot realistically do everything. Simplify it as much as possible. Xavier, does that
Awesome.
answer your question?
Do we have more questions? Let me see.
I really hope you were recording because
Yeah, I'm recording everything, bro. I mean, we coming to this will be like a massive hit on YouTube. I'm gonna send you all the numbers as soon as we get it.
Oh, who knows?
So yeah, guys. Chris, come on, Chris. What is the question?
Mine isn't that much of a question, but your words really resonate with what I've been doing. Essentially, like taking a small functionality and simply hallucinating on it, as you said, really makes me like do the most of it. And like the whole imposter syndrome imposter syndrome thing you said about like having auditing like bigger code bases really like affects me as well. Like all of the stuff you said, I believe is what everyone in this year experiences. Definitely. Thanks a lot
Yeah,
for the great talk, man.
yeah, it does get hard. Gets hard, but yeah, I do wish you some courage to push through, and it gets better. I mean, there are so many people. You have your strength that you may be unaware of, and yes, you're welcome.
Dravee, bro, I think this is it. I would
Mm,
like to thank you so very much. This was the best presentation we ever had on Open Sense, and we're running for 7 months now.
mm.
This is all recorded. I'm gonna make a super special Twitter post about it. I would like everyone in here to retweet it, so you guys know how much knowledge we got today. So let's also give it back to Dravee. Thank you so much. Any closing thoughts? Any message you want to leave to people that will hear to this in the future?
Who, me?
Yes.
Don't do drugs.
So everybody, please don't do drugs and
No,
and,
stay curious. Really, stay curious.
and stay curious.
Curiosity.
Without the
Yeah,
drugs.
it won't kill your cat. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I won't say anything. But just be curious.
Yeah, keep on curious. Thank you so much. It was a great section, and see you guys later.